Great, so it looks like we're all here. Welcome everybody to the Net Zero Community Energy webinar with Northern Powergrid. My name is Jodie. I am the Communities Programme Manager at Regen. Regen are an independent, not-for-profit and mission-led organisation, and we're very honoured to be able to join you today and host this meeting. I'm going to start with introducing you to the team. So on the call today, we've got Hannah. Hannah, would you like to say something?
Hi guys, so I also work at Regen. I'm sort of the behind the scenes technical lady here today. So if there's any issues you have, I'm the person to contact.
And we've got Kai.
Hi everyone, I'm Kai. I also work with Josie at Regen on our communities team, and we were part of the team that worked with Northern Powergrid to develop their community energy strategy. So I'm looking forward to sharing that and getting everyone's thoughts on that, and I'll be facilitating one of the breakout sessions later.
Thank you. Helen?
Afternoon, it's lovely to see so many of you. Wow, I'm Helen Priestley. I work for Northern Powergrid. I'm part of the Stakeholder Relations team. I'm one of your presenters today, and I've got the lovely job of hosting one of the breakout sessions as well.
Gavin?
Hello everyone, my name's Gavin. I am the Stakeholder Advisor at Northern Powergrid, working with Helen on our engaging programme, and I am also one of your breakout session hosts as well today.
And Anda.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you all at our webinar. My name is Anda Baumet. I'm Sustainability Manager at Northern Powergrid, and I'm also the Community Energy Contact in our business. I'm going to be presenting to you today, as well as facilitating one of the breakout sessions.
Thanks, Anda. We've also got a few speakers on the call, but I will introduce those as we go through the agenda today. In terms of housekeeping, we are recording this webinar so that anyone who hasn't been able to join us live can watch again later. We didn't have any objections to that when we sent out the joining instructions and told everyone that we were going to be recording. We will, of course, send you the slides and any content from today. So if you're frantically scribbling notes, you don't need to. We'll send you all the notes. Whilst speaking and presenting, you will be on mute so that we can avoid any background noise, because we've had over 100 people register for this webinar today, which is fantastic. In terms of questions, I won't be able to see you all raising your hands in reality because there are so many of you. So if you have questions, please do post them in the chat as we go. We will be using polls to try and get a bit more audience participation. So we will be asking you some questions, and we will be using breakout rooms as well. And that is to try and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to say the things they need to say and give that feedback to Northern Powergrid that we need to gather. So hopefully it's going to be as interactive as we can possibly make it, given the limitations of the technology that we've got. In terms of the agenda today, we're just going to show you that now. So Hannah's going to screen share that with you so that you can see the timings for today. We're going to be talking about the new Northern Powergrid Community Energy Strategy. We're going to have a bit of question and answer session after that. Then we're going to talk about how Northern Powergrid plan for net zero before the break. Then we'll be moving on to Emma from Community Energy England, who's going to give you an update on what's going on in the sector and what's happening as part of Community Energy Fortnight. We're then going to hear from Andy Hield from Energised Barnsley, who's going to talk to you about energy in a net zero world in terms of what it's like being in a real community energy organisation and what they're up to. We'll then move out into the interactive breakout sessions. Don't worry if you've never been in a Zoom room before. This is going to be a great initiation for you. You don't have to do anything apart from click, leave the meeting and rejoin the meeting. So it's very easy, and hopefully I'll give you that chance to ask questions in a bit more detail with each of our facilitators today. We're then going to get a bit of an update from Josh on the Rural Community Energy Fund, which is a critical piece of funding for anyone thinking about doing community energy in their area. And we'll try and sum up by 5 o'clock. So it's a lot to get through. We are going to try and make it as interactive as possible, as I say. But yeah, bear with us if we've got any technical issues. And if you do have any technical issues, please do contact Hannah. She sent you her phone number in the joining instructions, and you can post in the chat as well. So we've got Hannah and Ellie on hand to help you with any technical problems you may be having. So in terms of context for today, the Committee on Climate Change have said that we need to quadruple the amount of renewable energy we have on our system to keep our global warming within safe limits of 1.5 degrees and meet our net zero by 2050 targets. The International Energy Agency have forecasted that CO2 emissions are going to fall by around 8% this year globally because of the coronavirus and the recession that's happening as a result of that. Carbon Brief say that global emissions need to fall by 7.6% every year this decade to stay below 1.5 degrees. So what that's telling us is that behaviour change isn't actually all that effective in addressing climate change, and we need massive systematic change. So to transform our system and make that possible, the only way that we believe that that can happen is by bringing everyone with us. You know, this is everyone's responsibility to work together to address this major global issue. And we see community energy as a kind of fundamental cog in that wheel, because community and local energy organisations are absolutely essential for the social acceptability of mass system change of a big system like our energy system. They are really essential in terms of creating that local resilience and jobs that we are going to need to see as a part of our green recovery. And we're now into Community Energy Fortnight. So we're into the first week of Community Energy Fortnight. So there's lots going on around this subject at the moment. You might have noticed that there's a lot of webinars happening and lots of online content. So do have a look at that and make sure you engage in that if you want to learn more. We know from helping Northern Powergrid write their community energy strategy at the end of last year that climate change was one of your top priorities. That was the feedback that you gave us when we interviewed stakeholders in Northern Powergrid's region. Today is about continuing that conversation. You know, there's lots that Northern Powergrid have already been doing to engage communities and local energy stakeholders in the region. They've been running a Green Doctors programme, a Green Heroes educational programme. They've been working with with CAB on fuel poverty. So we want to really continue that conversation and continue that good work. We'll tell you about what's going on with their plans and what's happening with their future planning and how they're planning and strategising to deliver net zero. But really we want to hear from you. This is about you telling us what you need. It's about you telling us what's missing from the strategy, how you want Northern Powergrid to support you in the future, have your priorities changed because of coronavirus. So this is your opportunity to really influence what's written down. Northern Powergrid are a regulated monopoly. They're regulated by Ofgem, our energy regulator. They have to write down what they're going to do, and they're judged against that, and their funding is associated with that. And so this is your opportunity to really influence what's written down and to influence what they do in the future and what they will spend their money on. And preparing for net zero is going to involve collaboration. It's going to involve collaboration with all of us, as I've said. So this is one of the ways that you can collaborate with them. In the next few months, Northern Powergrid and all the DNOs are working on their plans, their investment decisions for their next price control period, which is called RIIO-ED2. And what that means is it's their business plan essentially for 2023 to 2028. And as I say, it's part of how they write down what they're going to do next. So they're going to be talking about that. And that's why it's important, because what's written down dictates what they spend and therefore how they can work with you to achieve net zero. So we really, really want you to be part of this conversation, and we're really looking forward to that debate happening today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Anda, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the work we did on that strategy and what's in it. Over to you, Anda.
Thank you very much, Jodie. Yes, I'd like to introduce how a business as well as our work on the strategy. So if I may start on the next slide by giving everyone an overview of Northern Powergrid. So we are a electricity distribution network operator in the Northeast Yorkshire, Northern Lincolnshire. We serve 8 million customers, 3.9 million homes and businesses, and we serve quite a diverse region with a lot of urban centres and quite rural areas as well. As Jodie mentioned, we're regulated by Ofgem, so Ofgem makes sure that we deliver the best value for the least cost to everyone in our region. and we're a neutral infrastructure provider here, making sure that your electricity is flowing, lights are on, and kettles are boiling 24/7. And on the next slide, please. As an infrastructure provider, we're a key enabler for the net zero target that many of you will be well aware of. So the target introduced last year legally binds us as everyone in the UK to get to net zero emissions into 2050 to reach carbon neutrality, if you like. So we've seen that a lot of these targets are echoed, and even more ambition is shown locally. Most of our local authorities, I believe we have 34 in our region, have announced a climate emergency, and a very significant part of them are looking at what they can do to reach the net zero target early. Many of them are focusing on 2030s, 2040s. And of course, that's a huge challenge, as well as provides many opportunities. But in terms of challenge, it does extend beyond infrastructure or technology. It does require everyone to act and to make different adjustments to their behavior, as well as what they're consuming, using, and thinking about. So it kind of completely refocuses the way we might have lived so far as a society. And on the next slide, please, Hannah, thank you. We also see that significant change has been delivered recently, not by choice, but by the pandemic, which is still quite prevalent in the country. So we've seen that this scale of change is possible. We've seen emissions drop, and renewable generation be at all-time high, with avoiding coal generation for about 2 months, if not more. And on 24th of May, which was a bank holiday, we all evidenced how the national grids, which is the transmission network operator, the carbon intensity on their grid reached all-time low. So that's a record set at 46 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So that's the greenest as it's been. So these events show us that it is possible, and with everyone acting and bringing it into action, we can deliver a future where this is the norm, as opposed to something that has resulted of a national emergency. And on the next slide, please. We think that recently we've seen that quite a lot of our focus has shifted to local areas where we live. And with the renewable generation that I mentioned previously, a lot of it by nature is quite local. So I think that community energy has quite a prominent role to play in delivering these net zero targets as well. And we know, when we're looking at our region, we know that we have more than 20 projects already. So we think that it will grow in the future. And a lot of you probably have joined this webinar, as Jodie said, because your climate change is one of your top priorities, and for the right reason. So you must be also looking at how you can help in terms of facilitating this target. But what we know from the research that we've done in North East, in Yorkshire, Northern Lincolnshire, is that often these projects, and by nature you'd think that is true for local developments, they deliver more than energy benefits, they deliver more than low carbon. Many of them facilitate and support local jobs, local investment, and benefits that translate beyond the pound value. Many of them are also a way to reach and support vulnerable customers and to save money on everyone's bills. When we talk about decarbonisation, we do focus on the net zero target a lot from all various angles. But what I think is quite important, and what comes up in many discussions very often, we do think about this as a predominantly environmental or economic challenge, but it isn't. It does. Any changes in the energy system also affect everyone differently. Any change affects everyone differently. So we have been thinking of what we can do to make, from our perspective, the energy transition more socially inclusive and take everyone on this journey with us. So these two pieces of work, one, the regional research, as well as this socially inclusive transition in the energy system, are two pieces of work that we're looking forward to sharing with you during this community energy fortnight. And then I'd like to focus on the strategy. We have been working with community energy representatives for a while, and that's outlined on the previous slide, please, Hannah. We've started supporting community energy in 2014 with organising a number of local events, and shortly after that, we established a community energy seed fund. So this fund has been live since 2015. In 2018, we merged the fund with Northern Gas Networks to effectively increase the fund and promote more local benefits to organizations in our region. And that has been operating with 2 rounds per year. In the light of the current situation, we have repurposed the fund to support vulnerable customers in our area. So in place of the 2nd round this year, that is going directly to support these customers who need it the most. We have also had developed our connections guide that has now been replaced by Energy Networks Association's guides, which are up to date, and they can be found on our website as well. And we've been working with Community Energy England. But looking back, we're always looking at how we can improve our support for community energy and how we can make it in time and relevant to today's situation. So we worked with the region to develop a strategy which we published this year. And on the next slide, you can see how we've, perhaps many of you will have informed this piece of work. So it was formed by 17 interviews, where you informed us what kind of support you're looking for and what could help you, and what can Northern Powergrid do to support either your project or your idea for a project, and any relevant community energy developments in the area. So from that, we took 26 different actions, and I know that a copy of the strategy has been shared with you already. Again, it's available from our website, and we'll make sure we should send you the link. So we're taking 26 actions forward during 2020 and 2023, which are to inform, engage, empower, advocate, and listen to the community energy groups. We're doing this by means of different actions, but just to highlight a few, we're sending out quarterly newsletters, starting from early this year when the first letter came out. We are planning to host a number of events to allow you to network and exchange ideas, and we're looking to hear what are your priorities and interests, and what you'd like to hear from us in these. And we're also doing more to signpost ways to engage with us, both with our website, through our events, and in the strategy. So we want to really build on the work that we've done and you've done so far, and develop it into a better ongoing relationship, and engage with you better. On the next slide, please. There are a few other things to highlight. So as I said, the strategy sets out how we think we can support effective communication and engagement, but at the same time, we'd like to hear from you of whether it covers everything, or you have a few more recommendations, especially because the world today has changed and all of us have switched to be more digital, not in person today. So we want to support any current or new groups in our region to effectively engage with us and progress with their projects, as well as gather their views and make sure their views are communicated to both our regulator, Ofgem, or the other relevant parts of our government. We have set up a community energy page on the website, and all of the relevant resources are there, although they are there. Thank you.
Thanks, Anda. So the next part of this session is to enable you to ask questions. So on the agenda is interactive questions session on the strategy and approach. I can see some of you on my screen, so you can have a go at raising your hands if you've got a question, but I think it's probably more likely that I'm going to be able to see your question if you post it in the chat. And perhaps whilst you're thinking about your questions, we've got a poll that we're going to post. So we're going to post the poll now, and you'll get to answer the questions in that poll, and we'll feed back the results shortly. And if anyone does have a question, please do raise your hand or post it in the chat. Bryony from NEA has also said that there's a raise hand option that people can click on in the participants tab. So if you've got the participants tab open, you can raise your hand in that. So we've got the results through of that poll already. It's looking pretty good, actually. The strategy is getting 59% on 4 stars, so that's really great to know. 5 stars, 15%. So, and 3 stars for 24% and 3 stars. So that's telling us that the strategy is good, but it could be better. Is there anything missing from the strategy? Yes, there's a few yeses there, 12% for yeses, a few no's and a few not sures. So I'm sure that you need time to digest that information and have a look at it. Kai has posted the link to the strategy in the chat, so do have a look at that in your own time. And have your priorities changed due to the pandemic? So yes, 26% of people are saying yes, 46% of people are saying no, and 29% saying don't know. So the top priority is still coming out as climate change in this group. Fuel poverty is second in that, on that list. Energy efficiency 6%, stakeholder engagement and support 14%, ease and speed of delivery 6%. Cost is not a high priority for people in this webinar, which is interesting because I ask this normally when I'm speaking at conferences and ask people what their priorities are, and and cost always comes out low, but that's because we're talking to an audience of people who are already converted in the climate change message and want to engage in that. So that's great to know. In terms of those yeses, have your priorities changed due to the pandemic? 26% of people, 9 people said yes. Would anyone like to share with us how their priorities have changed? Or if there's anything missing from the strategy, the 5 people who said there was something missing, would anyone from that group be prepared to tell us what they think is missing so that we can include it? Simon Kilshaw says, yes, a just inclusive transition must be incorporated into all net zero strategies. Absolutely. And I can't see anyone else raising their hand. So if you are raising your hand and you can't be heard, just unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, Andy Wilson says, number 1, harnessing changes due to COVID. Is that in terms of what's missing, Andy? Tim Branholtz speak, sorry, that's probably terrible pronunciation. In the strategy, there's talk of ambition for community energy to do local energy trading and supply. 1, this will need regulatory change. Could the strategy say something about the work with community energy groups to advocate for local energy regulations that allow smaller players like community energy to participate? And 2, not sure because it cuts off your
it's coming noisy here, so I'm typing it.
Great, thanks, Tim. So 2, include climate change as part of COVID recovery. That's from Andy Wilson. So Tim has a hand raised. So Tim, would you like to come in there? Tim, are you with us?
I think Tim shared what he'd like to share in his comments, because as he says, his kid's making a lot of noise.
No problem. Andy Wilson, I don't expect COVID to be part of the strategy, but it is part of our way forward due to the changes it's forced upon us. Absolutely. So in terms of that question about regulatory change, I'm going to reflect that one back to Anda, because we do have an action in the strategy about feeding back to Ofgem what is going on in the community space and supporting you to have a voice of influence in Westminster. Anda, would you like to pick up on that?
Yeah, thank you. Well, exactly, Jodie, like you said, we have taken an action that I briefly mentioned, and I apologize to everyone. We don't think because of the time, can't go through the detail behind every action, but you do have the strategy sent out, so we're keen to have a look at all of them with you. But regarding the specific question, we have an action that we've taken to amplify the voice of the community energy groups, which means questions exactly like yours. So I think we all know that legislation will need to change in many ways to both facilitate net zero and also to facilitate more feasible and an optimizing way the community energy projects can be set up, which is what you mentioned here as well. So the way we see we would do that, we would take your feedback from events like this, or your thoughts that you provide to us directly, and include them in the respective consultation responses which we submit to Ofgem, to BEIS, as well as kind of presenting that as part of our ongoing work. It is quite important to evidence the need for these changes, and also you might have some views on what these changes might be, which we're quite keen to hear, and then pass it on to the respective parts of the governance.
Thanks, Anda. So Rich Hurst says, why is it only a 3-year strategy? Surely we need longer. So I'm going to point that question to Helen. Would you like to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think it's a very well made point, and thank you. I think we wanted to have something that gave us an action plan, so you could see a series of direct actions and prioritize for you and to work with you, and so I think the 3 years enables us to do that. But I think you're absolutely right. Reflecting on where we are and also thinking ahead to business planning, we've got to put the foundations in place that have changed over time. So I think what we intend to do it is I think one of the things we want to say about it is a living document, which is why we've got events like today, because things are moving at pace. So yes, we agree, and I think when we reflect on it this year and provide an update, we will be thinking about how we balance direct delivery and engagement versus putting things in which have a longer, which build capacity over a longer duration. So yeah, we agree.
Okay, and then the next question is from Nigel Cornwall. So he says, I took the reference to trading to mean support for the local electricity bill. This begs the question of what that will do if approved. And we've had debates at Regen about this as well. So it's a great question. Thanks for that, Nigel. I spoke to the local energy bill team who've put that together. They're a campaigning organisation, and their position is that they haven't worked out the detail of what will happen to enable local supply to actually happen. They want to get it onto the agenda, get it into the political conversation, start having that conversation, and then let Ofgem work out the finer details of how the system would be changed to enable that to happen. But it's a really excellent question. Paul Rogers says, for local energy supply, there may be potential through greater support for setting up energy local clubs and helping develop the model. Yes, that's true, Paul, and I guess that's more of a kind of comment than a question, so I won't put that to anyone unless you shout now or forever hold your peace. And Simon Kilshaw says, increased energy use whilst people are at home and the likelihood of more home working may make retrofit programs and accessible renewable technologies imperative. Yeah, true. Again, more of a comment, so I won't direct that as a question unless you speak now. Tim says he was going to ask about support after innovation project end. In some places, people have got cut off. Colleagues Ian Cairns and Matt Hannon found an example in Scotland. Innovation projects are great, but need a positive legacy. Very much noted. Helen, would you like to pick up on that at all?
I think it builds on the feedback we've been having from other events about the importance of, well, a couple of things. Broadening the net of organisations at all sorts of sizes that we collaborate with around innovation projects, but also to be more explicit about how we describe how things are going to be embedded and what the next steps are. It is a challenge, and Jodie and Anda will concur around this, and others from the MPG on the webinar, that innovation funding comes with constraints and caveats, and often it's around things which are proof of concept rather than something that is has an implementation stage. But yeah, absolutely, we take that on board and noted. So thank you.
And we have Andy Heald on the call, who's been involved in several innovation projects. Andy, do you have any comments on that?
I have to unmute myself to say no, not really, apart from I think one of the changes which at the end of our innovation project with MPG, which was a network study, is as a community group we said, hold on, let's sit down now, because nobody's going to read the network study. And even the executive summary, you know, sometimes is tough to get through. So let's put us into a simple document which says, what are the community benefits from this? what's the network on and what's the market where we've been working the timescale. And that dissemination in sound bites, the community energy sector, the relevance to the network study with engineers and go and read it, the rest of the DNOs, for me, that was something which, an important thing we did this time round.
Yeah, great, thanks Andy. Bryony says, agree with Simon Kay. They say the richest, more able to work from home, are likely to be saving more money at the moment from travel, whereas the poorest are spending a lot more than normal on the basics, so worsening fuel poverty right now. That's a really valid point, thank you, Bryony. Rich Lane, hi Richard. The proof of the pudding will be whether we can get good technical support on projects. There's a lot of support for community energy engagement at the strategic and policy level, but I'm curious as to the level of buy-in from the Sparkies themselves. Okay, Anda, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, sure. I'm wondering if that's the same comment I was reading in the chat here, but I can't find it anymore. We have taken a number of actions in strategy to facilitate better conversations, and I think better conversations is exactly what we can call them, be it kind of engagement and communication, or be it technical support. So our design engineers would be happy to discuss what is the local infrastructure of the areas you're looking at. And we're taking a further action to identify what are the technical support we can provide, how we can help you with knowledge building, and aid it in more ways than just talking about the design scheme with you. So we're hoping these actions will answer that. Helen, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I was just commenting, and this is on our web events page on our website. But our connections teams, the design engineers, on a monthly basis, they hold surgeries which they're doing by WebEx at the moment. So, and those are flexible in terms of timings. And actually, the whole role of them is to provide guidance and advice and a practical conversation. And they're designed now to be very flexible. And I think we might have somebody from the Northern Powergrid team on the call who can provide information and a link to that subsequently. But I just wanted to make you aware of that those are always available and are really flexible and lend themselves to the virtual world we find ourselves in.
Thank you. Emma Bridge has said that the local energy bill webinar will be taking place next week as part of Community Energy Fortnight, if anyone does want to learn more about that. So do dial into that, and Emma's really helpfully posted the link to that in the chat. Rich Lane says, thank you. It's a big can of worms. I'm personally quite concerned about it. Doesn't actually promote clean energy or locally controlled suppliers, just proposes to open up to new markets. Claire Copeland, transition to DSO will require substantive rollout of smart technologies. Yes, it will. There are a number of barriers to adoption of smart meters. For example, not least because of trust. What activities is Northern Powergrid doing for this? How about we move to Gavin, because we haven't heard from Gavin yet. Would you like to reply to that?
Hello, yes, I can. Sorry, I was just distracted there. What question are you referring to?
Sorry, Gavin, putting you on the spot.
It's fine, it's okay. I just got an email at the same time and it reminded
So Claire Copeland is saying that the transition to DSO will require roll out smart technologies. What's Northern Powergrid doing to support the adoption of smart meters? And what are you doing about the trust issues related?
Well, we obviously have a smart meter rollout program, and I think I won't rehash some of the delays and difficulties within the national program because I think that we're all well aware of that. I think it's a shame we don't have Lizzie Middleton on the call. Actually, she'd be really good to put you in touch with. She's our smart meter rollout manager, and I think she's doing a good job. And we are seeing some growth in smart meter take up, especially with the new versions. We're actually working on using some smart meter data as part of an innovation project, which is around community energy in the West Yorkshire area. And we should be ready to share some information on that, I guess, probably earliest towards the end of this year. But I think people will find that quite interesting. And that doesn't require a huge penetration of smart meters across the district. So even where we're seeing, actually, we might not be getting the take-up that we would ideally like, there are still ways that we can use that data really effectively and really safely as well, I should say, with anything data, to try and improve people's services. But in itself, I think we're doing what we can do. We're working in partnership with others, you know, with suppliers and others, to try and get them rolled out as and when we can. Personally, I think it probably takes more of you need another national push on it, but we're making progress.
Great. Thanks, Gavin. Tim has said thanks to Helen and Anda for the thoughtful responses. Anda, that report sounds great. I was at the UKirk event last year where one speaker had found that 80% of pilot and innovation projects they looked up didn't have any published reports available on the public online, readable or not. So all innovation projects that are network innovation or network innovation allowance or network innovation competition funded are on the Energy Networks Association website through there's a specific portal, which we'll send around the link for that in a bit. That's not to say they're perfect. Some of them are extremely technical. I've spent a lot of time looking through these, and there is a huge amount of work to do in making those reports more user-friendly and engaging. So yeah, good point from Tim. Hannah has posted the link to the events page for the surgeries in the chat. So those surgeries that Helen was referring to earlier, if you'd like to book on one of those, please do follow that link. Simon, how to engage those people who must prioritise meeting day-to-day basics due to deprivation over a net zero climate change agenda? What will be the behavioural motivation? So that's a really good question, Simon, about kind of essentially about poverty and social justice. So I'm going to post that question to Helen. Helen, would you like to pick up that?
And I think I will do a part answer on this, in that we recognise that is a massive challenge. And I think we're doing two things. One of them is working with trusted partners. So those organisations that have the reach and are identified and trusted in those communities, in order to find out how we best can support those communities and understand the barriers, and build on some of the programmes of support which you referenced actually right at the beginning, Jodie, like Green Doctors and Sisters Advice, recognising that since during the last few months, obviously the situation has got significantly more serious. The second thing I just wanted to flag was we're actually about to do a piece of research to look at barriers, and that's focused on, we've already started a piece, but this is sort of a build on it, in terms of barriers for people within the communities working with us and coming onto our priority services register, where we can identify them and provide them with support directly during a power cut. And we'll be building on that, looking ahead and factoring what you've just described in, actually, in terms of the piece around decarbonisation. I'm very happy, obviously, and that's one of the things about today, to share what we've already done and what we aim to do, just so that we can think together about how to address it, because one of the key things within our approach is that we don't want to leave anybody behind, and that's a very, very big commitment, and it's a societal problem as well as something that we as Northern Powergrid take very seriously.
Great, thanks, Helen. And similar to that, Paul Rogers, I'm guessing that's Paul Rogers from 361, and he says that we're going back to the fuel poverty element of the strategy, and notes that new sign-ups to the PSR, the Priority Services Register, will receive a link to an online welcome pack. However, many of the PSR are elderly or vulnerable and may not have access to the internet. How are you looking to support this group? It's a really valid question. Anda, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jodie. For these cases, there's always an option to request a hard copy of the welcome pack, so we can send out a paper version of that, but but the default version would be the web-based, and I do believe the corresponding action in our strategy does include more detail about that. So of course we don't want to leave these people out, and we'll make sure we adjust to that as we are doing at the moment already. I wanted also to briefly touch on the previous question, because I think it is really important that fairness, social inclusivity is very, very important when we talk about decarbonisation. It is important when we talk about anything else. And I think when we're looking at the situation today and already seeing some recession and huge changes to our economic system, it is important that the mechanisms that are put in place to provide support to everyone to come out of this situation do not create more adverse impacts or don't create any unintended outcomes.
But your speaker is interfering, so we're getting quite a lot of background noise when you move.
Sorry. Yeah. So what I mean to say, and I hope you can hear me more clearly at the moment, that we need to make sure that we build back better, and then any type of economic recovery does provide and does consider environmental aspects such as the net zero target and vulnerable customers, or fuel for customers as well. So it needs to be socially and environmentally just as well as economically effective.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think there's a lot, given the amount of questions already being posted in this chat about that, that's obviously a big priority for people, and that was showing up as a big priority in the poll as well. Andy Heald has said, Tim, there's a business for someone to stick together a catalogue of past innovation projects and their results and relevance. It would be a great document. So thanks for that, Andy. That's a lovely segue to remind you that there is a community energy innovation guide. In fact, there's two. I wrote them, and they are on our website, and they highlight all of the innovation projects that have involved community energy organisations. I think there's even a case study of yours in there. So I'll get Kai to post those links in the chat. So if anyone would like a more engaging synopsis of some of the innovation projects with communities and network operators, then have a look at those. Mike Ford, there seems to be grants available for feasibility studies for renewable energy. Does anybody know of grants towards capital costs post-FIT? State aid rules should not preclude this. Really good question, Mike, and I'm sure Josh will be picking up and answering that question later on in this webinar when he talks about the grants available as part of the Rural Community Energy Fund. Emma might also know of some others. Keith Jackson, I agree with Claire Copeland, building trust with final customer is crucial. If it is them who will have to be persuaded to change their behaviour. Absolutely right. Any insight as to why improvements in take-up from Claire? Any improvements in take-up? Any insights in why improvement? Not quite sure what you're getting at, Claire, there. So Claire, would you like to come in and tell us what you are asking for that question?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I was just referring to, Gavin actually said about that there was an improvement in the West Yorkshire area for smart meters in terms of take-up. So I just wondered if there was any insights as to why. I know he referred to a new version of the meters, but was that it, or was there some sort of successful campaign that went on in that area, or what was it that caused for there to be an improvement?
Hi Claire. So I didn't actually mean in West Yorkshire specifically. We're noticing a modest uptake in new smart meters across the entire network. We're actually doing an innovation project in West Yorkshire is what I meant by that. I think probably though, if we want to explore smart meter uptake and how we're doing more thoroughly, we can definitely put you in touch with Izzy Middleton, our smart metering head of smart meter. I'm going to get her job title wrong. Head of smart meter rollout, I think it is, who has a lot more insight on this and can actually talk about what we are doing. She's not on the call today, but she certainly would be available for some conversations if that's something of interest to people.
That would be great. Thank you, Gavin.
No problem. I'll make a note of that, Claire.
Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Gavin. Okay, so I just scrolled through, I had like 23 new messages in the chat. They're all links to different guides and things that we've been discussing or comments relating to other people's questions. I can't see any other questions in there. So if you do have any further questions, please feel free to post them now. So Mike has posted that, well, Kate Gilmartin has said, hi Mike, the Rural Community Energy Fund will give up to 40k feasibility and then 100k development grant, but not capital costs, I'm afraid. Good point, Kate, thank you for that. Hannah's posted the innovation portal that we're talking about. Kai's posted the Northern Powergrid innovation page and the links to those community energy innovation guides that, that I wrote, I think it was in 2018, 2019. There we go. Back in the mists of time. Okay. Bryony has made a point that she understands that the number of community energy projects is lower in the northeast due to higher deprivation and therefore lower community free time, knowledge, resources. I can't think of the right word to run community energy projects. Is there any help to try and get over this and try to help the region catch up with the others? That's a really good question, Bryony. Helen, would you like to respond to that? Is the word capacity, which Lane says. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, we've just been doing a piece of work with Community Energy England, as you're probably all aware, and Emma might want to comment on this, the State of the Sector report, which Andrew referenced in her slides about the current position. And I think I think from our perspective, it is about working with those successful groups in other parts of the region and beyond to understand from you actually what support and guidance has led you to the position to successfully launch those projects, so we can act as an enabler to share that learning and also work with local authority and let partners. We've got Josh on the webinar just for that case, so that we can bring together all the support and also communicate that more effectively to help address that. Is that Emma and others and Josh, any more comments, I guess, on building on that?
I can add to that. So the LEP have identified community energy as sort of one of our key themes for the region in terms of energy, and we're looking to explore new ways of encouraging community energy groups to form and to come forward with projects. A number of the local authorities have also got sort of similar attitudes, so just a case of getting in touch, and we'll try and point you in the right direction and connect you with sort of other groups that have been successful in the region.
And Emma, would you like to pick up on that point as well? I know you'll have views on what's going on in the north, why there's less community energy in Northern Powergrid's region than other regions of the UK.
Sure, it's not an easy answer really. I think I was on a really interesting European project call talking about this exact thing this morning, and looking at how we can spread community energy more equitably, and how there are more examples now coming through of kind of less traditional models, so working more in deprived communities. and having that socially inclusive transition is so important. I mean, it's just heartbreaking, the fuel poverty figures going up, and kind of helping with that skills transition. It's a key core part of what everyone's talking about at the moment. It would be nice if there was more action on it and less talking on it, but one of the things that we're doing at the moment is looking at what resources there are, that there's lots of different resources that people are producing, so pulling that together in a way that people can access it easily. And we're also having discussions with BEIS, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Their priority at the moment is around the north, so they're talking to us about how we can help that, with us being based in the north. I don't think it's our role to do it necessarily. I think it's a grassroots up, but just helping that enabling, maybe through peer mentoring and that sort of thing. So happy to chat more to anyone who wants to help and work with us on that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Emma. I mean, in terms of reflections on that, there are some really good examples of community energy across the country being instigated by local authorities. So Plymouth Energy Community is a really good example of this. You know, I lived in Plymouth for 7 years, and it's got some extremely deprived neighbourhoods, very high on the index of multiple deprivation, and they had a councillor who basically got elected on a community energy manifesto commitment and then set up an arm's length community energy company, which is now one of the most successful local authority community energy partnership companies in the country, and is delivering extraordinary levels of fuel poverty alleviation work and energy efficiency and retrofit. And they own, you know, megawatt scale solar farms and solar on schools across the city. So it's a real kind of positive, good news story about how communities working together with local authorities in areas which perhaps are less well resourced in terms of capacity. It can work, and it has worked, and there shouldn't be a kind of oh well, we haven't got the skill here, so we've got to give up and go home. It's definitely about that kind of political will and collaboration and working together. And I think working together with your network operators as well, particularly in this case with Northern Powergrid being here and wanting to facilitate and support you to build your own capacity, that's going to be really important for you. And they've made a 3-year commitment to keep having these kinds of conversations, and hopefully one day we'll be able to bring you together in person, and that will really help build your capacity. Okay, there's a few more questions on here. Nigel Cornwall, does Northern Powergrid think there is a clear enough steer and support for from government on community energy? Has net zero increased the need for this? How can we understand the scope of supporting net zero nationally and regionally? Really good question. So who would like to pick up on that from the Northern Powergrid team?
I think it's important to say that the government has obviously had a lot going on for a while. It feels like forever, but it's not. With Brexit, and obviously at the moment with the pandemic. So we have been waiting for the energy white paper, for example, for, is it 18 months now, 2 years now, Jodie? Something like that. And something like that. And before that, we had the reorganisation of the department as well, and the creation of BEIS even. So there has been a lot of change, and at the moment, the department and government, as a wider government, is focused on recovery, where I think that there will be interest and there will be opportunity is around the green recovery and the role that community energy can play in the green recovery. So I don't think that Northern Powergrid would say, oh, there hasn't been enough focus, or this, that, and the other. At the end, we're a neutral party, if you like, that facilitates the establishment and running and maintenance of the network. However, I think everyone is quite keen to see some progress in this area, and I think we have a very good opportunity to do that. And it would be really nice, and I'm sure Emma will agree, and all of us will agree, that it would be nice to see community energy as a part of that within the energy space on lots of different, you know, not just for decarbonisation, but also job creation, you know, skills improvement, you know, and action and economic development of our region and all regions, I suppose. And I think that's probably what I'd say on that.
Brilliant. Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself, Gavin. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So yeah, I think that is very clear to me, having been involved in lots of conversations over the beginning of Community Energy Fortnight about the government's position. I mean, the policy situation in England is pretty dire for community energy right now, and it's brilliant that Scotland and Wales are kind of leading the way and setting targets and setting a clear kind of policy direction. But we don't have that kind of direction in England, and in the absence of that, what I'm finding is local authorities stepping up and declaring climate emergencies and working very closely with community energy organisations across the country now to make local energy plans, local area energy plans, and think about how they can actually get on with decarbonising their own areas at a regional and more local level, because of that vacuum of policy direction and support from a national policy level. And there's so much will from people across the country in their own regions and their own cities and their own towns and villages trying to do something positive about climate change. And that is happening up and down the country. So that's brilliant to see. But of course, we'd love some government support as well.
Just to build on that, Jodie, just to reassure everyone, and Anna might say something about this as well, but we, on the local authorities really taking a lead on a lot of this, we are very well connected with our local authorities. We are working closely with some, not so closely with others, but we're making a real effort to engage the officer class, but also elected leaders as well, to make sure that everyone understands that we're here. This, you know, what we can do. We do have a policy on community energy, and we're here to support them. And I know Anna's been doing some work as well directly around engaging with LEPs. We've obviously got North East LEP on the call today, but really to try and widen that and widen our sort of cross collaboration within the region at a sort of local government level. And that, as you say, is working really well. It would be quite nice if there was some national support as well, but we are making some progress as to where we are right now.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we're just running slightly over time, which is pretty good. I'm really delighted that so many of you have felt able to ask questions in the chat, and that seems to have worked pretty well. So we'll stick with that format going forward. Thank you for all your questions so far, and thanks to everyone who's answered those and helped answer them. It is time to move on now. We're going to have a session now from Helen and Anda presenting on the planning for net zero. So this session is all about how Northern Powergrid are thinking about the future and how they're thinking about it in terms of planning for their future energy scenarios, how they model what they think is going to happen on the network next, how they're thinking about their business planning for Rio ED2. Rio ED2 is the kind of industry jargon for business planning. So what they write down that they are going to deliver. And that is absolutely crucial for community and local energy organisations to engage in if we're going to have any influence over what happens next, what Northern Powergrid do, and where they spend their money. So really, really useful to have this presentation from Helen and Anda. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Jodie. I'll begin that in introducing the first few slides. So when we talk about net zero, I think we're talking about a number of different uncertainties here. And one, of course, is the pace and the way that we get there. The other is where do we start? But for us as a distribution network operator, it often includes all of that plus where it happens and when. So if we could have a look at the next slide, please. So what we are doing to model and understand this uncertainty is we're running a modeling exercise annually to see what could be the potential pathways to in the future, if you like. So to see what is the range of impact on things like our peak network demand, so we can make sure that we build the infrastructure in a way that meets all of those pathways, and it's there when it's needed. What we've seen is that the electricity demand has declined over the last 10 years or so. And that is a result of a mix of things, such as the energy efficiency and the different practices in manufacturing, or even discontinuation of some of the manufacturing processes. But of course, and when we look at the future, we know that electricity has a very prominent role, irrespectively of what is the reality that materializes and how we get there. So undoubtedly, that will play a part. We don't know to what extent yet. And this is what we're trying to understand better. So we will see an increased demand on the network. We've already seen a lot more generation being connected to our network. We have about 60% of the generation connected to our network in the recent years is renewable, and there is more coming. So the energy system, or the energy landscape, I feel like, in our region, it's becoming more decentralized, more local, as opposed to just transporting the energy from larger plants to your homes and businesses. And of course, it is very sensitive to the national and local policies, and therefore it's no surprise a lot of you have been asking about it just now, and we're also looking at what the changes bring. Gavin mentioned the Energy White Paper, which has been long anticipated. So I'll tell you a bit more about what we've done to date to understand that, because I think it's really useful. It provides useful tools to understand what is the scale of change, where it might happen, and how, and that can inform everyone's actions or plans. At the same time, with presenting this, I will just want to invite everyone to start these conversations with us early. If you're planning larger developments, tell us about that, so we can work with you to make sure that we deliver you the right infrastructure in the right time. And visibility is very important, because modeling only takes us so far. So if we can have a look at the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of background behind our work. We have our own model for looking at these things, but many of you will have heard about national grids, which operates the transmission system. So the big pylons in the country, transmitting the energy from the north to south and west to east. So they produce a view on the whole of the UK annually. So what they've done so far is they've used 4 different scenarios to do the exact same exercise, to map what the future might look like. So these are not forecasts, these are pathways. We're looking at how we could get, so how the country could get to its emissions target, which up to last year was 80%. So National Grid has done their modelling for the whole of the UK for 2 scenarios that met the 80% emissions reduction target, which is now near 100, and 2 scenarios which would be continuing life as we know it, and perhaps not getting there. And these are kind of widely known exercises they do for seeing how it could affect the country as a whole. And from that, on the next slide, you'll see we take this as one of the inputs from our work, and we add some regional information and statistics and the regional network topography, and we produce our own distribution future energy scenarios, which is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about modeling. So this provides a regional view on what the future might look like, what these potential pathways could be. And it's a two-way conversation with the National Grid, because of course we also gather the information which comprises both of our modeling work and what we already see connected to our network today, and we provide this information back to the National Grid, which will then inform their next year's modeling. And this is a continuous process, and it has been going on for a number of years. we have been using the same language for our work. We've used the same 4 scenario names just to allow that comparison from national to regional level. However, last December, on the next slide, we've published these scenarios, and we've partnered up with the Open Data Institute in Leeds to allow us to publish our work in an open data format, so that's accessible for everyone to have a look at, to do and run their own analysis, and to explore it in detail. So we're hoping this provides, and it has through many workshops throughout the last year and the beginning of this year, has provided a lot of material for great discussions, and our stakeholders and businesses and people and local authorities in the region are feeding back their views on what their plans are, what they think is happening, and how it aligns with ours. So what we did here is we published a lot of data files, which are your Microsoft Excel spreadsheets that allow you to access the data itself, as well as a report which outlines our approach, which I'm trying to briefly summarize today as well. And alongside that, we appreciate not everyone will be keen to dive into the analysis and have a look at the numbers and crunch them ourselves, perhaps. So we provided a visualization tool, a sort of a heat map, and I think you can see it on the next slide, which allows you to explore the data without downloading the spreadsheets. You can go to the ODI Leeds website, have a look at it, click on your local area, or have a look at the whole region and explore what you want to have a look at. Say if you want to see how many electric vehicles there might be in 2050 in your local authority, you can have a look at it. Or if you are interested in network peak demand, you can also find that there. So there's a range of parameters that you can have a play around. And we also have, and you can choose which scenario you want to follow. Again, I'll repeat, this replicates then the National Grid's approach. And because the net zero target was announced quite late, so when National Grid had done their number crunching already, and when we were also in the process of that, this is providing you with kind of an illustration in general, because that is still modeled to reach the 80% target. So we're currently working internally on see how this will change to meet net zero. What is it just a little bit more? Is the technology mix going to be completely different? So we're working to update this to make it representative of our current law, but it will still give you a good illustration of what the pathway is and what it could look like. And I think for me, when I look at my regional, my local area, it's quite a substantial scale of change, and a lot of things need to happen for us to get there, make it a reality when you look further ahead. And there's quite a lot of action happening in 2030s, 2040s. What is also interesting that a lot of local authorities I mentioned in the beginning, they're looking at advancing this net zero target. So it would be interesting to, again, that's something we're looking at, how we make that happen. What does it mean for the cost? What does it mean for the local authority? Does that mean they're quite different from the region? Is it possible? So, and one of the key questions we've been asking everyone is our assumptions. Here's the data we're presenting here. Is it correct? Does it feel true to you? So we've been extensively looking for feedback on this during the end of last year and the first quarter of this year. What we're doing going forward, this is just the beginning of this conversation. We're looking to continue this approach. So we will be refreshing this for this year. and we'll be seeking your views again. So we have currently collated the feedback that we have had to date, but by all means, we are always interested to hear what you have to say about these tools, whether they're useful. And I appreciate in many cases they just provide an interesting view to understand what is the scale of change, what might or might not happen under different scenarios and under different assumptions. And ultimately, what we want to do with this work is to understand where and when we need to deliver appropriate investment in our network as a to support this pathway to the net zero target. And that is what we're currently working on. So I'm not sure if I have another slide or if that's going to Helen. No, I think I have another slide here. Thank you. So this is, yes, so this is one of the tools that we have made available online with the data, with the heat map and the report. But there are others that we've been working on, and I think some of these will be quite relevant to yourselves with your interest in community energy. So the first one is a very exciting tool. It's called Auto Design. So what it allows you is to go online on our website and have a look at the low voltage network in your area. It allows you to have a look at different technologies you might want to connect. And what it does, it effectively substitutes an application or a request to us to have a look at this infrastructure, which would take up to 10 days for you to get that information. You can do it yourself in about 10 minutes or so, and have a look where would be the most efficient and best place to connect an electric vehicle charger, heat pump, or anything else. It gives you that visibility using a simple traffic light system, so it marks the low voltage network in green, yellow, or red. We also have the generation and demand availability heat map. So when you're looking for a generation project and want to have a look at your local infrastructure at kind of higher voltage levels, this is your go-to. It will show you our substation network and their current status, and that's updated monthly if I'm not mistaken. Then a few more things to highlight. One is the Accelerator Loss of Mains Change program. So the next ENA funding window for this closes in August 2020. For those who are wondering what these words mean, so this is a program that helps owners of generation assets make the necessary changes to ensure compliance with the new settings for the distribution code. So this is relevant for everyone who owns generation that's connected to ours or any other network. So that's something to have to just be informed and have a look out for. And then finally, I think we mentioned our connection surgeries a few times during our discussion. They're still available. I had a quick look at the website that someone helpfully posted in the chat, and I see that there are none listed at the moment. But shortly in our slides, we'll be providing our community energy email, which is communityenergy@northernpowergrid.com. And if you're looking for one and you can't find it online, if there is no registration day, please feel free to drop us an email, and we'll make sure that there's one set up for you in the virtual space. Or we also have general inquiries telephone number that you can approach and get one arranged. So I think that takes me to Helen's session, unless there are any questions that are immediate about these slides.
So Richard Lane had a question about auto design is only for consumption connections. Is right, not for connecting generation assets to the LV network.
In fact, it's both. So you have the full view of your low voltage network, and heat pumps, for example, they're type of demand asset, which you can. Sorry, your question is about generation assets. I just read that. There should be both. If they're not there currently, there's been a while since I looked at the tool. they should appear there soon. We're always looking to improve this tool. One thing that I didn't mention in the auto design is that it generates a design scheme which is almost ready, and it just needs to be verified by one of our engineers. It would also give you a cost estimate for that specific connection, but I believe there should be solar PV, for example, as type of generation there already. So you should be able to pick between different options and have a look at that, both for generation and demand.
Michael Brown says, is it possible to access or download the data from the Northern Powergrid mapping tool for DFES, for distributed future energy scenarios and others? DFES tools data updated annually. Is it updated annually? Oh, Andy, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. So absolutely, that is the purpose of us publishing this data online. So you can download it from Open Data Institute Leeds website. If you Google distribution future energy scenarios, you'll come across it. There's 50 or 60 files that you can download and have a look at, as well as the visualization tool if you want to have a quick snapshot of it. And yes, it will be updated annually. As I mentioned, this is kind of the first open publication that we've done, but of course the energy landscape is changing all the time, so we're looking to update that to inform both you and us.
Great, thanks, Amanda. Okay, keep posting those questions in the chat if you have any more. And we've got more of the Northern Powergrid team online here, so Siobhan and Emma answering questions as well. So please do keep posting those questions, and we'll do our best to get back to you between the Northern Powergrid and Regen teams. We're going to move on now to Helen, and yeah, I think that's a really useful run through under open data on distributed future energy scenarios. Going to be super useful for anyone thinking about new developments, local energy plans, anyone thinking about where to connect new generation. So all of that data is super useful, and great that you're taking that open data approach. Okay, Helen.
Okay, thank you all. I'm conscious I stand in the way of you and a cup of tea or coffee. So I'm going to be concise, recognising that we might want to pick up, questions post-break, and also you've got Northern Powergrid in the breakout sessions. So we're moving on a bit. When we thought about this session, what we wanted to do when we talk about net zero is to talk about some tools which Andrew has done, which are in the here and now. And I just want to reflect on what we're doing to think about business planning, moving us on to how we plan for net zero and how we absolutely need your help. So if you could move on to the next slide, Hannah, that would be brilliant. So Jodie opened and she described, and many of you know on the platform today, we're a regulated business. And what that means, one of the key characteristics of that is that we plan ahead of time. So at the moment we are, amongst all the work that we're doing, we are preparing our next business plan, which now is in spans of 5 years. So we're preparing a business plan for 2023 to 2028. And if you think about what's changed in the last 6 weeks, goodness me, if you think about what's going to change and how we can prepare effectively to know how we can manage the network in 2023, it is a mammoth task. So part of that, quite rightly, is that it's incredibly important that we get feedback from our customers and our stakeholders, everybody on this call and everybody within our region, to help to make sure that that plan is the best it absolutely can be, which is a really significant task. Which is one of the reasons why we're talking to you, and we continue to talk to you, and that conversation is really important. So we've popped on here, it's a key time for engagement, challenge and feedback, and I know from people on this call, on this platform, we get lots of challenge and feedback, particularly from this group. But I also know that doing what you do, you have to be enterprising, you have to know how to overcome barriers, and you have to get your message across, because that's what you do often in your spare time, which is why your voice to us is so incredibly important, because you have a passion that we absolutely need to capture within the business plan to make sure that it's fit for purpose and continues to put in place the foundations for net zero. So what I wanted to do was just very, very simply and at speed talk you through our timeline and give you a bit more information about how we approach business planning, and then really a call to action for all of you. Right at the beginning, one of the slides, when Anda opened, she had a slide, if you all remember back to then, which had our region on it, what we do, which we would try to really describe simply, but also how much we cost. And you might remember, on a very average basis for our domestic customers, we cost around £80 of your electricity bill is the cost of the network. And we know that affordability and value for money is absolutely critical. We've had so many conversations on this call today, around the issues around where we are with fuel poverty. So as we think about the business plan, we're in a process. There's a complex diagram which we really try to simplify, which goes into how we get ready and then prepare a business plan for Ofgem. And we've tried to chunk it into a number of areas. Gosh, we make it complicated even on here. And these are my words somewhat, around getting ready, and consulting and engaging and asking as many stakeholders and customers from across the region what's really important to you. How can we be doing what we do better, and how do we prepare for the future? And at the moment, we've done quite a lot of this over the last few years, which I know numbers of you have been involved in, but also more intensely over the last few months. And we're developing a piece of work called Emerging Thinking, which is where we start to talk through some of the priorities and initiatives that are coming forward to improve what we do and make those preparations. So we're in that process, you can see on the diagram that around now, where we're developing our emerging thinking. And we really need your insights, to test whether we've got the right list of things that are important, that we're representing your views, and that what we're doing, whether our scale of ambition is appropriate, particularly for you as representing our communities, but also the different aspects of our region. Do you want to move on to the next slide, please? So when we talk about the business plan, because it is a very complex and arduous process, we've tried to simplify it into chunks. And you might expect to see these here, and they're ones that our regulator Ofgem asks us to put in sort of chunks of activity. But sort of for ease, we've shown them today in these three areas: developing an environmentally sustainable network, where we're talking about our plans for decarbonising, supporting and enabling decarbonisation and net zero, how we ourselves look at our carbon footprint, and how we address and ensure that we're an environmentally sustainable organisation, and we manage our impact across the region. Maintaining a safe and reliable network, which is all about our delivery of power across the region, ensuring that we don't have power outages, picking up things such as cyber security, how we're adapting to the climate, and ensuring that our work is safe for our business, but also for our communities. And then meeting the needs of consumers and network users, our customer service commitments, our support for connections, and what our service offering is and should be in the future for our domestic and our business customers. And importantly, a lot of conversation today around how we ensure that we are a force for good in our communities and provide capacity building support and respond to some of the challenges that we've heard around fuel poverty, and also in support of community energy as an enabler for change. So when we talk about the business plan, we talk about it in those areas. And my role as stakeholder manager is to ensure that we provide opportunities to have conversations about the big chunks, like delivering environmental sustainability, and also very detailed conversations around some of the key plans around, say, environmental protection, some of the options that are coming forward around that, and what they mean, and whether they're ambitious enough, and ambitious at what cost as well, recognising we want to ensure we're really good value for money. So we're on with that process. We're going to gather more feedback from you today, but this is really a real plea from us as a business to ensure that we provide as much opportunity, and we want to get feedback on how we do that, particularly to gather your feedback and continue to gather your feedback as the business plan shapes, so we can have your challenge, so that this is something that is the best it can be for the region that we're all really passionate about. Next slide, please. Yeah, we're going to do very briefly a really quick poll just in terms of your areas of interest. Hannah, if you could just pop that up. Thank you. Thanks. So we're really interested in, and I know that most of you would say all three, but we are asking you just for this exercise just to choose which one of the three is at the top of your list, if you have to, because I know again your time is limited. Thanks. Okay. I'm looking for some thumbs up from Hannah and Jodie that we can move on. They're holding me on. They're saying one moment. Great, yeah. So we've got 50%, 56% of you maintaining an environmentally sustainable network, but very closely followed by meeting the needs of consumers and network users at 38%, maintaining a safe and reliable network, which we often get feedback about which many people just say, get on with that, that's your core business. 6%, thanks very much for that, that's really helpful. And then finally, my last slide, recognise that we're going to talk a bit more about this a bit later on, and has already raised our email address, and we've got a dedicated newsletter which is quarterly, where we try to focus information that's really helpful for you. But importantly, as well as engaging with us, we're wanting to set up a community energy stakeholder panel where we can get greater insight and have a more in-depth conversation with you on a regular basis, as almost an advisory group to us, to keep us on track and to hold us to account. So we would welcome volunteers for that. You know, that would really make our day if you could have a think, and recognising that you've got massive commitments, and so we want to be really flexible about how that runs in terms of timings and involvement. But please, if you have an interest and you feel you can represent your communities, please let us know. And Amanda reiterated this before. We really love to hear from you when you're in the thinking mode, but when you're in the planning mode as well, and also when you want help and guidance. So so please continue the conversation. And today is really about how we ourselves can be so much better about making sure our information and engagement approach works for you, so you get the most out of it. But please come on the journey for our business plan, because you will make a massive difference to it. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Helen. So we've had a few questions coming in whilst you've been speaking, which is great. One is from Claire Copeland about how do Northern Powergrid activities compare with other DNOs? Is there much competition? It's a very good question. Are you talking about competition on community and local energy engagement, or competition on DFARS, or is there, do you want to expand on that a little bit, Claire?
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking generally about competition, wanting to be seen to be the best DNO in the UK, especially as you transition to a DSO. There is going to, I would have thought, be more competition on that front.
Question, Helen?
Yeah, it's a difficult one in terms of, I think we would want to be the best DNO in supporting the needs of our region and providing the service that they need. So I kind of reframe that question. So yes, I think, and Ananda will comment, you know, in terms of new models for the future, that has, you know, that's an important development for the business in terms of use, in terms of how DSO develops. But I think sort of fundamentally, though, as DNOs, you know, we are incentivized by Ofgem, you know, to ensure that we deliver the best service. But I think it has to be hearts and minds, in that we've really got to understand our region, understand the differences and the challenges our particular region needs, and ensure that we are there and to provide the services that's needed to support the growth of the region and the service that they need first and foremost. Andrew, is there anything you wanted to say about I suppose, the new energy markets?
I think it was summarised really well by you, Helen. I think it is no surprise we're a natural monopoly because we're local, we're regional, and it's like you say, we want to be best for our region, and we want to meet the specific needs of the people in the region, and kind of that's why we're also asking you a lot about your priorities. And we think that is part of what takes us on this journey of the energy system transition. So one part of that is what are your needs and priorities. The other one is the technology and the infrastructure there. So I think that all needs to come together to deliver the best service possible. And I hope that answers to your question.
Thank you. I wondered as well if there would be any eye on the future as you become a DSO in merging with other DSOs.
That is a question, Claire. I don't think any of us would have the answer to it, actually. I think it kind of depends on, we think we know what DSO will look like, and we think we know how it will work, but we don't actually know that yet. So I don't think any of us would be able to answer that. Would anybody dissent? Does anybody think we can?
I'll probably just add that we've outlined our vision of what is our role as a DSO in the region. I don't think it's us becoming more kind of managing the regional system more dynamically and balancing the renewable generation with the demand more actively. And to some extent, we're doing that today, but kind of becoming more prominent in the future. But don't think that so. Our region will not change because of that. Evidently we'll need some decisions from the government and from the Ofgem to enable this to happen. So we're always working with them to see how we need to change and how the regulation might change. So it is part of an ongoing process and kind of transitioning to this role and enabling more decentralized and local generation and more renewables in the system. But it's also very specific in terms of what Helen just described in our business plans. So what are the changes that need to be there in this next set of 5 years to make sure we're on the right track, on the right way to go towards this shared vision.
Okay, there are a few more comments and questions coming in on chat. We will try and answer those in the break, and we're going to have a pause now to let you all go and get a cup of tea and have a comfort break. The time is 20 to 3, so we're going to come back at 2:45 and cut our break down a little bit to 5 minutes, if that's okay with everyone. So we'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Thanks very much. Hannah, are you happy on putting everyone into groups for the breakout?
Yes. So I've put everybody into groups. We've got approximately 10 participants in each group at the moment. So if we have any dropouts, I'll let you know ahead. But
yeah, I'm expecting a few more to drop out for that. So that will probably take us down to about 8 per group.
As long as you're comfortable with, I mean, the other option is for me to close in the groups, but I think we'll be okay where we are.
Yeah, if it's less than 8, don't do that. But if it's between 10 and 8, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And thanks for taking the time.
That's okay.
Speak up and shout at me if I do that again.
I was going to say that actually, because there's been a couple of times where I don't know whether or not I can just sort of come in and just say.
Yeah, definitely on timings, because my computer clock is on my other screen in the far corner. So to see it, I have to like do this. And it's saying, yeah, 15:44 at the minute, and my watch is quite different. So.
Okay, yeah, that's absolutely fine.
I'll look at my phone, actually. I'll just put my phone clock on. But normally I know we're behind, and I'll DPD again. Like 3 people coming to the door.
Really? I've got so many parcels that I need to be delivered, and I haven't got any of them. Yeah, I should be at your house. Arrive.
And the other thing is, can you hear the rain?
No.
There's like it's hammering it down here, and I'm worried about the background noise from the rain.
No, you're okay. If I've got it at the moment, if interference happens, then you can sometimes swap between different cameras, but I just spotlight people and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
You having a problem?
Refill my water bottle.
Yeah, we do.
It's really great to see so many questions coming in on this format.
Really positive feedback as well. That's great. So we've got a minute left on the break.
Secretary Treasurer says we're having a very public chat.
Yes, yeah. Should we kick back off again?
Yeah, it's hard to see whether everyone's
back. I think it's 2 now.
Great. Okay. Great. So welcome back, everyone. It's great to have you back with us. We, as I say, are running a little bit over time, so we're going to try and make up some of that time this afternoon, make sure that we finish on time to not keep you any longer than necessary. It gives me great pleasure now to welcome Emma Bridge from Community Energy England. It's really great to have Emma's time in, particularly this week when we're right in the middle of Community Energy Fortnight for this week and next week. And yeah, she's going to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the sector and introduce the State of the Sector report and talk about the vision for community energy and the future of community energy. So Emma, over to you.
Thanks, Jodie, and yeah, thank you for involving me. It's been a great afternoon so far. I think the discussion groups coming up in Andy's presentation are really important, so I will very much canter through my slides and yeah, aim to do it under 10 minutes. Let's go for that. So the first slide, please. So I won't focus on this other than to say that our mission is to support and accelerate the transition to a fair, low carbon and community-led energy system. We work really closely with thought leaders like Regen, National Energy Action, who I know are taking part today. We're very much a collaborative organisation, so trying to bring people together who have the same ethos as us in order to grow community energy. Next. I think it was December last year, we published the results of a research project that we did with Centre for Regional Economic and Social Research at Sheffield Hallam University to explore essentially why a lot of what's been discussed already, but why there were relatively few community energy projects in Yorkshire and Humber in particular, but similarly in the North East and down the east of the country as well, and what the opportunities and challenges were for the sector. And this is something particularly keen in just because we're based in Sheffield. I've worked across the north for my whole life working on community-led climate action, and it really frustrates me that I haven't managed to do better at getting more projects in the area. Having said that, there are a lot of really excellent projects, we just need more of them. So for this project, we conducted a fairly detailed research project looking at regional policy, interviewing community energy practitioners such as Andy, who's speaking next, and we do really appreciate the time everyone put into that. In terms of some of the findings, we found that there were significant achievements by 9 community energy projects across the region, and there were lots of pockets of technical expertise developed over a number of years. As part of that, community share offers have become proven reliable way of raising money, and there were some local authorities in the region as well that have shown consistent support for community energy projects. And as we've seen by the chat earlier, that's really important for helping the growth of community energy. However, as ever, there are significant barriers to progress. And some of the main ones that we found were, unsurprisingly, changes to feed-in tariffs and regulatory regimes, limited capacity volunteers and specialist staff, difficulties in achieving economies of scale, lack of access to influential politicians or funders, and other things such as accessible sites. And then what we did find in Yorkshire and Humber, that these barriers were exacerbated by some institutional challenges. So one is that Yorkshire and Humber has less voluntary sector capacity per capita than other regions, and it has stretched public services and funding cuts, economic disadvantage, and also we had a focus on more challenging technologies such as hydropower, which is where I started out unsuccessfully. And then for the region, and I should imagine that this is very similar for the rest of the Northern Powergrid areas, so the North East and down to Greater Lincolnshire, some of the policy actions that we recommended as part of the report were integrating community energy into the planning system, which has already been mentioned, business rate relief for community energy investment, a recyclable loan fund, and also a regional fund to support grid connection, as there have been areas across the region where the cost has proven prohibitive. On my last slide, there is a link to the report, and then we share all those details in more detail if you would like to look at that. Yeah, and then I think probably time-wise, that's enough said on that one for now. Can I have the next slide, please? So Anda mentioned earlier about their regional state of the sector report, and last Friday we published our 4th national state of the sector report for England, Wales and Northern Ireland. This slide shows some of the headline figures. There's lots of detail in the report that sits behind these figures if you would like to look in more detail. But we found that by the end of 2019, there were 300 community energy organisations, and last year installed about 15.5 megawatt of new electricity generation, which, looking at the slide, that brings the total in England, Wales and Northern Ireland to about 194 megawatts. And if you bring Scotland into that, that takes us up to 265 megawatts. So we're well over now the 250 megawatt target, but we've still got a long way to go. In terms of heat, there was only 27 kilowatts of heat generation last year. So that brings England, Northern Ireland, Wales to 2 megawatts and 13 megawatts across the UK. Energy efficiency was really interesting, and that's already come up a lot today. We found 102 community organisations engaging 234,000 local people since our first survey. We're providing 28,000 energy efficiency improvements or upgrades. And we've seen that really as an upwards trend going forwards. And then there were 39 organisations involved in storage and 47 in transport. And then moving on, please. So I just included this slide really to echo what we've been talking about the lack. You can see down the right-hand side of the country, there's a huge gap there in terms of projects. Now this is for electricity generation, but it's very similar for heat, transport projects and storage projects as well when you look at the maps for those. So just really wanted to emphasise that, and then that's something that we at CE has mentioned as they're trying to look at how we can support further development in this area. Next one. And this really I just included because I thought it might be useful for the discussion groups later. So these are the main barriers and support needs that were identified in our survey. So most of the barriers were related to the feed-in tariff closure, but a lot also to lack of organisational capacity. And I think that actually relates to how many other barriers are shown across the rest of the red circle. It's just such a mixture of them, from high grid costs to access to finance, support for innovation. So many more things now that community energy has to know about in terms of the complexity of the grid, riskier projects, innovation projects, and that does have a negative impact on organisational capacity. And that takes us on to some of the support needs in the green circle. So looking at those, subsidy support, early stage funding, we've talked about, expert support, knowledge sharing, they're all the key ones, but then other things around planning complexity, investment support, lower grid costs. So I really think that these sorts of discussions, these webinars that are happening today throughout Community Energy Fortnight are really important for us helping to overcome some of those barriers. Next one. This is just on a more positive side. So even though the growth of community energy has slowed over the last few years, we're seeing some really exciting innovation coming forward. And importantly for me, it's not just technological innovation. That's really important when we're looking at climate change and decarbonisation of the grid. But if we're going to have a really powerful local impact with our energy, we need more innovative business models and partnerships and really looking at that social innovation. And that's where the Energised Barnsley model that Andy will be talking about is just so great, because it's about that social innovation as well as technological innovation. And next, please. And this also, I just wanted to show that there is a pipeline of projects coming through. As ever, most of the activity is still focused on electricity generation, but you can actually see more of a spread across all the different categories there. So you can really see some of the alternative or multi-technological projects coming through. And also what's interesting is you can just see the red line around the yellow bar, that's the amount of FIT supported projects that we know of that are coming through, that are pre-registered for feed-in tariffs. The others being developed this year aren't actually with the feed-in tariffs, so there are those subsidy-free projects coming through. Next, please. Which then leads me quickly onto another report which we've launched as part of Community Energy Fortnight, which is our vision for 2030 for community energy. And just to say, this is our vision, this is the sector's vision. We spent a lot of time talking to our members, having consultation events as part of our wider events. So this is something we've very much come to as a sector. So it's kind of our collective view. And for those of you that know community energy, it's not particularly groundbreaking. So, you know, our vision is that community energy will create an energy system that's democratic, decentralised and decarbonised, where people are put at the heart of the energy transition. I've done a much longer presentation on this and kind of myth busting some of the things around these sorts of statements. But the main thing for me to pull out here is that it's not just the ambition there, it's the proven potential. There's so many research things coming out from really respected academics, and WPI Economics recently produced data, which you can see here, that shows by 2030, with the right support mechanisms, community energy can actually be between 12 and 20 times bigger than it's today, contributing over 5,000 megawatts, powering 2.2 million homes, supporting 8,700 jobs, and saving 2.5 million tonnes of CO2 emissions and adding £1.8 billion to the economy. So we want communities to have access throughout the country to community energy and really taking opportunity of those wider benefits that come from a community-led approach to energy. And then next. And this is just to say, as part of the vision document, we look a little more into what community energy is, what some of the key components are from it. We've also got a range of resources on our website that's free for you to use. So you can see the image on here, so lots of presentation templates and different things that can help you communicate what community energy means to you. And next. And so, yeah, finally, I said I'd say a little bit about community energy, but it's been mentioned quite a bit already. Thank you very much, Jodie. For me, Community Energy Fortnight is just so important. We've obviously rechanged the focus for running it this year with it all being online. We've actually found the need is greater than ever for us to all come together, chat, share our challenges, our learnings and so on. There's been lots of webinars taking place so far and over the next week. All those that are recorded will be sharing on our brand new YouTube channel. There's lots of opinion pieces, blogs, videos, Twitter. Do go and have a look, as it's really important right now for us to be coming together to start to work towards what happens post-pandemic, leading up to the COP. There's so many things now for us to be working together on just to make sure that we do truly have a just as well as net zero energy system. And then my final slide, I think, is just the links there for anyone who does want to find out more information about what I've talked to. And hopefully that was under 10 minutes and I didn't speak too quickly. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks so much for that, Emma. So if anyone does have questions for Emma, please post them in the chat and I'm sure Emma will be happy to try and answer those on the chat. In the interest of timekeeping, because I've been very poor chair in keeping you to time, we're going to move swiftly on to Andy, who's going to give you an update on the role of community energy in net zero from a kind of from the horse's mouth. This is a genuine live community energy project up and running and delivering great projects that we want to hear about. And when I've run these sorts of workshops all over the country, this is often the most popular part of any of these sessions is hearing it directly from other community energy organisations doing similar things to give us inspiration and hope that community energy is definitely possible. Andy, over to you.
Hold on, I'll just give myself a drum roll. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, so I'm the co-founder of Energise Barnsley. I also represent Community Energy England on the Energy Networks Association Steering Committee for Distributed Energy and Energise Barnsley on Ofgem's Challenger Group for small users on future network access. My presentation, I'll talk about a bit of background about Energise Barnsley and a little bit on the model now, as we've touched on that earlier, and then go on to the projects which we've run with Northern Powergrid, and then pause towards the end on just what we're doing next. But before I start, I suppose I think we ought to take this opportunity to seize the moment for Northern Powergrid, the DNO, to put such a good document out and to recognise that in their forward model going forward over the next, whether it's 4 years or 10 years, has to involve us, the community, is excellent. To have a point of contact now is also excellent. And I say that because if I look back in the last decade, when I started dealing with DNOs in 2011, I often say it was a lot like going into maternity ward for the first time. And when you do that, everyone in there, they're professionals, they know what they're doing, they kind of speak their own language, and it's 24-hour. And you pop in, you think you're unique, but you're just like everybody else. You go around in the washing machine, and then you come out. And there's very few in there which can actually meet you and hold your hand. That was it back in 2011. It got steadily better and better and better. I think what we're seeing now is a recognition from the DNOs, Northern Powergrid, to say, we need more people who can talk to community energy groups, which subsequently have skilled themselves up a bit. So they've got more education on what needs to be done for connections, can talk the language a bit more, and it's a great marriage. So going forward, fantastic. So I'll go on to my slides. So EB, in terms of largest rooftop solar community energy organisation in terms of number of roofs we've installed on, and it was back in 2015. We're an independent community benefit society, and by that I mean independent of the council. So we've got a really, really strong relationship with BMBC. There's 4 community members and 2 council members on the board. One who sits in the executive committee of the board, who's our chair, and also they have a custodian. They are our custodian trustee. Our assets are on their buildings. It started because I had run other community benefit societies. So this is a model where if there's a lack of expertise, or some groups don't have the time or have run a few projects, don't run anymore, you can then have a community developer come in and say, okay, we're going to build the assets and then let the community run it, do the next project and the next project. And we're kind of seeing that with the solar farms which are being acquired by the large social investors. So you do all the heavy lifting for them. So councils these days where either budgets have been slashed or jobs have been merged, perhaps they won't have the time. And I see the community energy model sitting nicely alongside their business model, say, okay, then what can we do in here on our assets? All we ask was community groups is officer time. Now that officer time won't be short because these projects take a lot of time, but then we're doing all the heavy lifting for everything else. So that's how Energise Barnsley started. And I'm glad to say that Barrows Cadbury Trust did a piece of research on our model and recommended it to BEIS, because it wasn't the predominant model where a lot of community energy groups had come from within their region, but that's because they were wealthier areas, had a lot of retired engineers in. You do need an anchor person at the council. So by that, we were fortunate. We had the contact and assets who saved his local football club using the Community Benefit Society model. So that person knew all the nuances about CBSs, which again, looking into the next decade, now a lot more people know everything about them. But they were able then to pull all the different levers within the council. So they sat in assets, but they knew how to communicate with housing and energy and strategy, with the legal people, up to the cabinet and also the leader. So that was a way to set the Community Benefit Society up. In terms of our social environmental impact, and we've got some stats there, but at the bottom we write a social impact report, and I'm glad to say we've helped through our fund. Then every year, Age UK Barnsley, they run our energy advice clinics. We've also, again, working with the council, got them to tie in with Citizens Advice Bureau in order to target a particular area which suffered from winter deaths. Community farms, so we had a rehoused rabbit to present at our AGM. Previous AGM, we funded a local church to run low-income cooking for unemployed people, and they presented. And also, in terms of the relationship with the council, we've worked giving them advice either as a sounding board on other particular models, or in planning applications in terms of new housing, what you'll need to do in terms of battery storage space, where to put it in houses. We've worked with them in their white label energy tariff, and I'm glad to say the profits from that in terms of the referrals they make, that then came into our community funds. That was written into a cabinet paper, and that for the one particular year added 30% to our community fund, and that was a direct fund of Age UK's headquarters to put LED lightings in, which is fantastic because that's where a lot of day centre meetings are held. Going on to our projects, so the one we ran with Northern Powergrid, the 2-year solar and storage, it was a network study. But we actually, in 2015, actually went up and down the country and looked at all the battery providers. So we initiated it, and we had to choose a battery provider based on our solar experience, which was actually going to last. The period of time was one of the first criteria. And then we chose Moitzer. We worked with them and then approached Northern Powergrid. Then Northern Powergrid with us went to the NIA funding through Ofgem, and then Northern Powergrid ran the project. So that's how that one initially started. And I'll go on to talk about the results from that shortly. We're now running our own project where we applied for the BEIS domestic demand side response funding, put together a team which includes Passive Systems, Oxford Brookes University, Northern Powergrid, and then subcontracting to Son and Mitsubishi and Bernsey Homes, so again, using the council's Arm's Length Management Association, our close relationship with them to do our installations. Finally, we ran our first Positive Climate Action Seminar at the Town Hall at the beginning of this year, which is fantastic. So we had Sheffield City Region and the council give their climate strategies, and this was after the local academy school had their green environmental champions present to the audience. And that was brilliant in itself, because there are a lot of councillors in the audience and they wanted a lot of the community, the school, to come back and speak to the chamber directly. We also had local businesses and two community energy groups, including ourselves, present at that climate action seminar. And we'll be running that each year going forward, particularly looking out towards the next decade. Thanks. I can move on to the next slide. So this is just some of the publications which we've been included in. I'm glad to say I mentioned the Barrow Cadbury Trust report, which is run by CSE, and actually Rachel Cox-Coon came to and spoke at our climate action seminar. It's great, because if you don't know her, she was wearing her council hat in the area she lives, as well as the CSE hat, and she always speaks directly and bluntly, and it's fantastic to have her. So that report was good, and also the one by WPI Economics in terms of the model we're playing, helping to develop solutions to major challenges facing the energy system. And for me, that kind of says, and when I spoke at Apps Energy events, the structure of the Community Benefit Society can sit to finance projects anything from 0 to £10 million. There might have been a sweet spot 10 years ago, 100,000 to 250. But I think now, as Emma mentioned, the capability of raising finance, the confidence of the structure, the legal paperwork means that, yes, we can look at projects which perhaps are too small for major infrastructure projects of the council or time consuming around this area and run them quite successfully. I'll move on to next slide. That's one nicked off Community Energy England, so Emma's covered that, so I can carry on. So in terms of our solar and storage network study, and this started 2015-16, one of the advantages is working alongside a local authority, and somebody at Northern Powergrid, is you're working at scale. So if you are looking to do things as pilot studies, you can then implement them at a larger scale. One of the disadvantages is that your tenants who you're working with, they're not going to be necessarily prosumers. So if you have somebody who's a prosumer, somebody who buys solar and buys a battery, and if there's a problem with it because they paid that capital, they're going to let you know. But when you're working on social housing, then some of the challenges earlier on are to say, okay, are we doing this for the better of the tenants? If so, how much choice should they be having? And when we actually run projects, we try to make it as seamless as possible. And one of the things which come out of this study is we then went to the Ofgem Sandbox trial to look at a peer-to-peer trading platform. And that was with using MPG as acting as a kind of checks and balance. Because of their regulated status and monopoly, in any system, local energy system, where you're going to pass on the benefits to tenants, we are talking hundreds of pounds, not thousands. So in order for the data to be processed and for a third-party intermediary to be trusted to process that data and then to pass it on, that was our use of MPG. And we got to the stage with Ofgem where they said, okay, none of this can happen under a regulatory framework. You need to go and fund this yourself. There's a couple of others who are doing something similar. So we left it at that. And I now know that a few of the community energy organisations do have funding in order to continue that. Back onto this story, solar and storage network study. So one of the reasons we did it and the results When we installed solar, of course, we couldn't install it on the amount of homes we wanted to, because we had a percentage dropout. So this study was trying to say, okay, if we're going to we put the solar in, you can see the houses, which are sort of east facing. And at the end of it, if we're flattening that curve, can we add additional homes? And this is going to come full circle, because next year we'll be looking to do another 1,000 homes. And as I can see from the MPG generation heat map, there's only a green area in Grimethorpe. So again, going back to what they're giving today, it's fantastic. I can now go to Anda and say, look, I've got 4,000 homes to aim for realistically. Can I work with you, your heat map there, to do a sieving process for me? And can you just clarify what, if we're going to be charged once for this? Because then that's going to help with the speed of installing more homes. We did for the tenants in terms of benefits. So in terms of reducing electricity bills, it saves them between 30 or 60 pounds. These were bungalows. They weren't high energy users. The demographics were pretty much over 65s. It tied in terms of Northern Powergrid's vision of expecting 80% rooftop PV to have storage by 2030. They wanted to know whether, if everybody, as we've seen, puts generation on, and would it have to be curbed, so what we can do for that. So if we would go on to the results. The top one, which is every solar system should have a battery, that's pretty fundamental if you don't pay for the battery, because ultimately we're all spilling, if you've got PV, electrons onto the grid, and they're not really accounted for. And so in this basis, again, looking to the next decade, you do have already inverters which can have both a PV and a battery. The savings here don't account for whatever your battery manufacturer or aggregator are going to do in terms of aggregating that battery set. So you could probably add on another £50 there, 75 depending where the contracts go. We had 100% participation in the trial, and it says the aesthetics were fine. That's key, because in our next project, we've got a lot larger battery. Does more, but for this, with bungalows, the battery sat in the outhouse quite nicely. Small things like it had a little sticker on with a friendly face. It's going to go into people's homes. People like that. We've got 65% reduction in peak demand, 38% reduction in peak export. But as I said earlier, at the end of the study, we got the lead project engineer, who's fantastic, from Northern Powergrid, plus Element Energy together, and said, okay, what does this actually mean? In the report, which is X long, we need to break it down to what it means to the community, what it means for you guys, and also give us a sum of what, if you defer network enforcement, or if you don't do it at all, what can we look to add to our models going forward in order to add solar and storage. And that's what ended up producing that little document, which I know I have copies of, and I know MPG do. So that was the solar and storage project, which ran for 2 years. Got about another 5 minutes, haven't I? If you go on the next slide, that's all right. So Project Breathe, again, this, we initiated it, and it's decarbonisation of heat in homes. So had the advantage of our housing association already installed 600 plus heat pumps. They were dual source, so less technical jargon. There's no gas at the homes. So these houses are, have electricity bills which are 2 or 3 times the average compared to a normal home. So if you're going to do any DSR project at this level, have to aggregate it again. It's not a question of just trying to aggregate kettles or anything else. You need the chunky stuff, which has a lot of electricity demand. And also the part which Northern Powergrid play is to provide a substation data monitoring and network analysis, because again, there's different ways we're going to decarbonise within a home. If it is going to be heat pumps, and then you might add power showers as well, then that peak demand in winter, when everything's going flat out, will just exacerbate the actual demand. So you want to be able to flatten that with batteries. So if I go into the next slide. That's our first set of homes where we've installed these. And again, here we've gone for 2 different types of homes. Those are code for sustainable homes with underfloor heating, solar, different angles to the sun. They've got the dual purpose heat pump in. And then our second set of homes are going to be post-war homes, which also have heat pumps. So they're not as thermally efficient. And we're going to see whether our shifting of demand, utilising the battery, what the difference is between the 2 housing stocks, because as we all know, there's a lot of old housing stock within the UK. We're trying to capture at least 80-90% of the solar generation in the homes. And as I previously said, when working with the tenants, you might have consumer bills of electricity units of 12,000 units. So one of the first things we do as a community organisation is to then look at their energy bills, see if we can lower them, give some advice like that. But also the app, which we're giving them courtesy of passive photo, we're going to the next slide, and the things we're putting in the house, we're trying to put as little material within the home, so we're retrofitting the battery, plus that's the size of the in-home smart device. But this is giving tenants control, a little bit like the Alexa. So on the way home on the bus, they can put the temperature up and down to control their homes. So it's increasing their energy awareness, making them more familiar with how many units they're using and why they're using it. Because if anybody switched from gas and electricity to solar electricity, there's always a shock within that first year. One of the things we learned from this so far is tenants do have room temperatures of 24 to 25 degrees. So if you then go to automation to something which is going to save them bills, it will be a bit of a shock. So there's quite a bit of a learning curve there. Right, I will crack on. I'll go to the next slide, which will be our academic partner. So Oxford Brookes have done a lot of work in this particular field and also on solar and storage, and they are doing qualitative interviews as well as putting monitoring equipment at the homes at the beginning, at the end of the project. And if we go on to the next one. Project stages, so we're halfway through and we'll be doing more installations. We had to do a pause for COVID-19. I'll go into the next slide. So in terms of the next steps for Energise Barnsley, as I said, we're looking to do some more solar projects, and we're in the world where we have to recognise that there'll be less electricity bill savings, but accentuate the more carbon emissions reduction, which is the good news is now that there are funders who recognise that equation. So it's not purely about financial returns. We have got through Cabinet an agreement to do another 1,000 homes next year, put a little bit slightly on hold for whilst during COVID-19. We're going to refinance our solar bond. So our solar bonds pay 5% each year. And then we have a long-term debt facility, which is tied to the Bank of England interest rates. Unfortunately, that's been decreasing, which means we'll have more money through our community fund. We'll also collaborating with others to do projects based on our experience so far with the legal and the financial asset management roles we played and the governance we have in place. And we've got a slightly wider remit to tackle climate change from a community perspective, which includes projects on hydroponics and also on solar on more schools if possible. So happy to take any questions. Finally, that is a short-nosed seahorse, hippocampus. It could have been a migratory salmon in the River Dern, but I use that because that came from Greenwich. So in our climate seminar, particularly the work in this sector, when you actually look at what's facing us, it's pretty doom and gloom. But considering the River Thames was a dead river in the 60s and 70s, there were 21 species of fish found in Greenwich, including that little friend. So there is positivity when you come together with policy, with community engagement and some sort of funding. So that's why I have a seahorse on the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Andy. That's brilliant. Such an inspirational run through of some of the great work that you've been up to. There's some really good chat going on alongside that in the chat box about batteries and carbon footprint of batteries, and keep that conversation going. I'm going to open it up for just 2 burning questions for Emma and Andy because of time. So if anyone has any really desperate questions that they want to ask now, please let me know. Either in the chat or wave or shout at me, and you can ask those questions. So Andy Wilson says, hi Jodie. So we're going to unmute you, Andy, and you can ask a question. I think you need to unmute yourself, and Hannah's going to unmute you. You're ready to go, Andy. You're interested in the new solar bond. So, and also Richard Lane is asking, could we ask Andy to clarify the context of that every solar system should have a battery sentence? My ears pricked up at that as well, and I think that's probably taken a little bit out of context, because I think what Andy Heald said was every solar system should have a battery if someone else is paying for it. And that's a kind of critical difference there. Andy, do you want to respond on that one?
Spot on, Jodie, you were listening correctly. It is, because if you take away, if you're given it and you've got solar, then we know that particularly in homes when there's good irradiance, you're not using all of that and it gets spilt. Have you ever asked a DNO on those copper wires, where does all that go? Who's accounting for it? It's not. So if you're given it, then you are increasing your usage to 60, 70, 80%. In winter, we all use the solar in our homes because of the lower amount of radiance. So yes, the point is, as batteries comes down in cost, or you have one organisation already. DNOs can't own batteries, but it's not saying that they couldn't fund or energise Barnsley to own 10,000 batteries in areas where you need that to support the network. So for me, again, we put solar in homes with just solar on its own. But the smart thing now that we know now is you have to combine it, because then there's less stress on the network. There's more benefit to the individual household. So you're entirely correct. Every system should have a solar system if the costs are correct. And in our case, it's because it was paid for using funding.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to pass that question on new solar bonds to Emma. Would you like to respond on that? So Andy Wilson's interested in how new solar bonds could look post-subsidy.
Andy might be better talking about that. One thing I would quickly say is it's something that quite a lot of groups are looking at. It's a really good way of looking at kind of more how you do scale up and bring in more money whilst keeping kind of that local control and accountability. So some in the southwest and the south are looking particularly at community shares being more for local areas, and then bonds to bring in broader investment, so that they still have that one member, one vote, that involvement in local AGMs and that side of things, and then bringing in the bonds so you've still got that wider engagement but doesn't quite have that same democratic thing that community shares do. But I mean, Andy's had more of the practical experience, so if you want to come in, Andy.
So on our model going forward, in terms of installing more solar in homes, it's not relying on being tied to one supplier. It's not relying on the smart export guarantee. Where councils have installed solar in the first few years at the higher tariffs, then, which is 6-7 years ago now, pretty much those systems are paid for themselves. So in our particular case, there's 13 years left of tariff coming in. So the council agreed to say, okay, if you're the society, we can write an IOU for those 13 years, and effectively you're going to gear that by installing the amount of homes now and raising the finance, because community groups no longer need 7-8%, to make these work. So we're down towards the 3% with inflation, or 4%. So that's our particular model there, which could be used with other councils which put a lot of solar on to begin with. It doesn't work any post-subsidy at the moment if you don't want to tie your tenants into a particular supplier. In terms of the difference between bonds and shares for community groups, yes, the one member, one vote with shares. The bonds for us, the 5% per annum, work very well. Given where interest rates have gone there, we can refinance it at a lower amount, which means more for the community fund. And we have a high community fund, 7,500 per megawatt installed, which is very high anyway. So I've seen a couple of groups where the 20-year shareholding with the way it's structured, and it builds towards your IRR at high level, then that can be a little bit punitive because you are asking people to stay in. But it's horses for courses in terms of what are current returns elsewhere. And it just so happens at the moment we're at a point with a 0.1 interest rate, you're being paid to take debt, negative interest rates. So now's the time, given the additional things we do on environmental and social things, now's the time that community shares, community bonds, you should be hot to trot, because of particularly where you've got a good track record, good governance.
Just to say, there are a few community share offers out at the moment if anyone is looking to invest in community projects.
And where should people find those, Emma?
I'll put a link in the chat. I'll do that now.
Thank you. Okay, so keep those questions coming and comments coming and discussions. We're having really good engagement on this call on that chat function, so that's really, really great to see. It is unfortunately pushing us way over time, so we're going to move swiftly into breakout. Thank you so much to Andy and Emma for those really great presentations. The interactive breakout sessions are now going to be cut down to 15 minutes to keep us on time. And we're going to be split into 4 groups. So Kai and Gavin, Helen and Hannah, Anda and Emma, and me and Siobhan are going to lead you through those discussions, and you'll be put into your breakout groups now. All your facilitators have the questions that you're going to be asked. So we'll see you back in this main room in 15 minutes.
We've tried to pack so much in today, but I guess in terms of preparing for net zero, and what we've tried to do is to explain what we're doing now, but also about how we make sure we're engaging effectively and giving people opportunities. Do you have any comments around that? What would make your lives easier in how so that we can, I suppose, have your voices heard? Any comments?
It's such a big topic, isn't it? I don't know. Am I on mute?
Yeah, no, you're fine. Go for it, Andy.
I mean, it's such a big topic, isn't it? So I think we've got to recognise that most people don't find energy interesting. And you're trying to carry a lot of people, aren't you? Yeah. And also it's complex. So yes. If you're I think you've got to set your stall out where we're meant to be, aren't we? Third-party organisations then giving this information out to our members or to the people in our projects, and also prepare them for a time where, I mean, the other elephant in the room: electricity prices have been falling. So we're not at this point where everyone's banging on about how expensive it is and everything else. The groups yes, the communication, and also an honest appraisal of, you know, how much can be achieved through this route, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that is helpful. It is, as you said, it's about us finding a way to make sure that we're explaining, I guess, what we're going to propose, how much that will cost, who will benefit from that, and what the alternatives are. You know, so it's being really transparent, but also doing it in a way so we can get more people to engage with it and have a view as appropriate, which is a challenging one. But because it costs everybody should have a say, shouldn't they, somehow, even if it is let the experts have a voice. Jack, have you got a view with regard to net zero?
Just in terms for the future energy scenarios, the sort of, when you go on the website for that, it's things like, you know, by 2025, under this pathway there'll be X number of electric vehicles, X number of air source heat pumps, blah blah blah. Is that, you know, is that something that should be used when the net zero version comes out? Is that something that should be used as a target for certain pathways, or is it more of a case of, yeah, I know it's pathways rather than predictions, but would that be something that, you know, again, as a social housing association, we can turn around and say, we've got lots of houses here, this is what we should be aiming for, and be sort of using that as not necessarily targets, but guidelines for
it's almost, it's like scale, isn't it? And that's the thing about it. It's whose job is it to drive it forward? Mm-hmm. And the challenge, I guess, around it's whose target is it? Is it local authority's target? Mm-hmm. Is it a national target? Or and I guess from our perspective, it's putting in place to enable that target to be reached or to happen, and for someone to own it. Debbie's put a comment in, hasn't she, in terms of chat? Just bear with me. Would it help if Ofgem regulated DNOs so they were rewarded for facilitating community energy projects? Thanks for that, Debbie. I think I'll respond to that in that, as part of our business plan, we've got we have one of our areas is called is how we leave a lasting legacy within our communities, and part of that is looking at what sort of support or capacity building we as a DNO it would be appropriate for us to do, recognising that there's market forces at play out there as well in terms of regulation. But so I suppose Ofgem are asking us to answer that question as part of our business plan and put proposals forward as to what sort of capacity building support which is appropriate for a DNO we should put in there. So one of the things we will be asking you, I guess, as we get more into the detail of the business plan is what would that support look like? I'll move on in terms of the questions. So apologies for because
I was going to say we've got literally a few minutes. I'm going to have to jump out just in case anybody comes on quickly. But my colleague,
it's okay.
At the moment, and I will.
It's okay. I suppose. Sorry, this is. I've got two questions, and they're both massive. But I'm just going to. I'll start with the first one. Just see what everybody says. What should Northern Powergrid's #1 business planning priority be? I suppose what's the area that you have the most interest in, I guess, going forward, and that would, you know, where you'd want to get your sort of sleeves rolled up?
I think for me personally, it's the sort of, it's not necessarily a #1 business priority. It's two that have to go together of, you know, decarbonisation and ensuring sort of social justice. So, you know, targeting decarbonisation programs at, so to start with, the households that are in fuel poverty, to ensure that, you know, they're not in fuel poverty anymore, and then not going to be negatively impacted by, you know, if all the middle class households put solar panels on their roof, and then these houses in fuel poverty have to pay a disproportionate amount towards the upkeep of the rest of the network. So
that's so sort of fair and just. Any comments from you, Andy?
Sorry, I was reading comments. You caught me on hot there. What was
It's all right. There was, in terms of the areas of the business
Yeah.
plan which you're going to emerge, are there areas in there where you'd want to get your sleeves really rolled up and contribute?
Yeah, I mean, it all goes down to capacity, doesn't it? So there's nothing worse than getting all the stakeholders together for a project, and then lo and behold, you've got dropout rate, you know, in the high 60, 70%. So it's just understanding capacity, because that point about, yes, we've asked for special status, you've given us that, but we know we can't have special status within the regulations. But it is the understanding of, look, we want to put X amount of solar on the street, or you can only have one home. You know, okay, if you can, when can we have more? So it's what you're spending on capacity, what you're doing in order to aid more generation to go on.
Yeah. So it gets into the commercials. Thank you. And then finally, as I can see this timer of 40 seconds coming up, in terms of future events or webinars, any comments about, because I felt this is, I'm great you've hung around, but this has felt like we're really playing with your time in terms of a 3-hour chunk. What would work better for you in terms of events or webinars? Or any topics, any comments?
This online one. Sorry, go Jack.
I was just I found the session fine personally.
You have, okay,
Andy.
that's good to know. Andy, what were you going to say? So it's a thumbs up from.
Yeah, I quite like it online as well.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much. We've had some comments from Debbie. We've got the thing, they're guiding us back in 114 seconds. But yeah, Debbie's reiterated the fair and just framing. So that's great. Thank you both. And thanks, Debbie, for your comments on the chat. I'll press the leave button now, and then we'll all miraculously end up back in, won't we? It won't be a second.
I think we're waiting on a few more people left to come out of their breakout rooms. Did everybody find that useful? I think at the time was quite limiting. Didn't have too much. So just waiting for the other rooms to finish their sessions. Ah, Jodie's back.
Hi.
So I think we're just waiting on Kai and Gavin's room left to join us.
Can you just shut them down?
I could do. Can I be that mean?
Isn't that the beauty of online webinars?
Ultimate control.
Yeah.
Hang on 2 seconds, let me kick them out. Here you go, they're coming back now.
Okay. Let me know when we're all back, Hannah.
Yep, you are all back.
Welcome back, everyone. Sorry, that was a super fast whiz through of some of the things that we wanted to talk to you about, but you've got the gist of the questions. So we will ask you for feedback and more feedback after this session. So if you've got more things that you want to say to Northern Powergrid about what you think of their strategy, what you think they should be doing, what their number one business priority should be, and what you'd like to see at future webinars or events in the future, we'd really like to hear that from you. We're not going to go around and take feedback from the groups because we recorded all those sessions either in note-taking form or recorded them by pressing the record button, or we've got paper notes in my case, old school style. So we'll record all of that and we'll feed it back to Northern Powergrid so that they get all of that information and it isn't lost, because that is absolutely crucial in terms of how we decide to, what we decide to do next, to engage with you and talk to you about this stuff. And there was some really interesting, I know there will have been some really interesting conversations going on that probably needed to be longer. So we'll aim to enable more time for that in future. I'm going to pass over to Josh now. Josh and Alan, actually, who I just met in my session, who's Josh's counterpart in one of the other regions in your area, responsible for the Rural Community Energy Fund. So they're going to talk you through a little bit about what's going on with that now. And I'm going to pass over to Josh.
Great, thank you. I will absolutely whiz through this because we're sort of pushed for time. Probably, I think I could do it from the first slide, to be honest, but we'll go through them anyway. So really, I just wanted to make everyone aware of the Rural Community Energy Fund, if you're not already. Give you a bit of an overview and an update on where we are. And if this had been sort of next week, we would have been able to tell you about some really exciting projects that are coming on board, but we're still in the process of sort of appraising those, and they're not aware if they've been successful yet. So I'll take you through this anyway, though. So the Rural Community Energy Fund has been set up to help rural communities develop renewable energy projects. And we want community-led projects driven by the community, and you can work in partnership with others as well, and that would be great to see alongside that, the communities. In terms of size of project, we're after projects that require planning permission or generate energy from multiple buildings, but yeah, single buildings can be reviewed on a case-by-case basis too. Funding available, there is £40,000 available for feasibility work, and that covers sort of the technical side of things, the commercial, what do the financial models look like, what does planning look like, operation and governance moving forward. And then stage 2 funding is for further project development, so really building on the feasibility work and getting that project ready for investment. For England, there's £10 million available, and the North East Yorkshire and Humber Energy Hub have 1.45 million of that budget. And there's still some left to be spent, which is good news. Next slide, please. So this is the magic map, which details which areas are rural. If you wanted to find out if your area is classed as rural, either use the magic map or get in touch with myself or Alan, please. Next slide. Eligible groups. I think the main thing to pull out from this is that it's not just community energy groups that can apply. It's sports associations, registered social landlords, parish councils, and we've seen a mix of different groups applying. Some sort of traditional community energy organisations, but also parish councils have featured quite heavily, and in some cases they've sort of set up their own community interest companies or BENCOMs to deliver these projects. So if you know anyone in a rural area, we're trying to sort of maximise the different organisations that can get involved. Next slide, please. The focus is on renewable energy generation, and that's power and heat. So there's the sort of list of technologies that we're looking to fund under projects. You can look at energy efficiency and storage and grid services, but the real focus has to be on renewable energy generation. Next slide. Yeah, stage 1 grants, that's to cover your feasibility study. So as I said before, technical consultancy fees, project management costs, community engagement activities, things like that. Next slide. And so far, 7 projects have been supported, at a value of over 220,000. We will be announcing some more that have been supported soon. Some of the projects that we've sort of supported, the 2 mine water heating projects, but most projects are sort of focused around solar, and a few sort of decarbonisation of heat projects. Parish councils have been involved, and we're expecting the first feasibility study end of June. And yeah, latest round we had 15 applications, which was a sort of pleasant surprise for us. And actually, it was a shock to the system, to be quite honest. But it's really good to see, and it shows that there are community groups out in the North East, Yorkshire and Humber who do want to be active in community energy and drive forward decarbonisation in their local communities. Next slide. And then deadlines, 1st of August for the next one. And then there's only 2 more after that. So 1st of November and the 1st of Feb. Next slide. And then, yeah, if you want to discuss the Rural Community Energy Fund, you can get in touch with me or Alan. So I cover the North East and Tees Valley, and Alan covers Yorkshire and Humber. Thank you. I think that was 5 minutes, wasn't it?
Very speedy. Thank you so much, Josh, for being so on time. That's incredible. I was sort of messaging Josh earlier in this webinar saying, could you possibly speed up your session a little bit so I can give more time for breakouts? But that to me is an indication of how, you know, fundamentally important it is that we have these discussions, and it's brilliant to see so much interaction on a webinar like this. It's always uncertain when you go on a digital platform as to how much interaction you're actually going to have, and the fact that everyone has asked so many questions today and it's been such good engaging discussion online and in that chat box is really, really good to see. We want to see more of that in future, because this is very much about those conversations happening and about talking to Northern Powergrid about what you want to see in future. So yeah, it's really great to have you all. Thank you so much to everyone who's taken part today. In terms of wrapping up, we will of course send you all the slides again, just to reiterate that. We will be asking for your feedback in a minute as well. So if you can stay on and give us your feedback on a poll, that'd be really helpful. And also email Hannah or Kai if you've got any more feedback that you'd like to give to us, because we didn't have a lot of time in those breakout sessions to talk about what support you need from Northern Powergrid next, what you think about their approach for planning for net zero, their #1 business priority. I think we kind of covered that earlier actually, in terms of, you know, most of you said that the environmental concerns and decarbonisation were still the #1 priority for most of you on this platform, which is great to see. It's as I suspected, but I know that some of you, the priorities will have changed, and there's been lots of debate today about fuel poverty, for example. So it's good to see those subjects coming up and coming to the fore, so that we know that that's something to focus on in the future. So tell us what you want to see at future events like this. You know, this was definitely very much planned to be a face-to-face event, but it's almost fortuitous that it's been online, because it's meant that so many more people have been able to come online and talk to us today and talk to Northern Powergrid directly. That's really important in an area like the Northeast, where it's, you know, the geography is such a challenge, and we were talking about that in the breakout group that I was in. You know, the geography is challenging to get around and talk to each other and help each other build that capacity. So yeah, it's been great to see so many of you on here. I'd really like us to be able to thank the speakers, and I don't know if it's even possible for Hannah to do this, but just to unmute everyone, so that anyone can actually traditionally clap and thank everyone in the traditional manner. So I'd like to thank the speakers and the team. You know, Northern Powergrid have worked with us really well over the last few weeks to put this over the last few months actually, to put this work together, and it's great to see a DNO being so proactive and engaging in this way. To the Regen team as well, who've put a lot of work in behind the scenes to make this happen, and to all of you for turning up and participating, because without that interaction we really can't plan for a better low carbon future that creates that just transition that we all want to see. So yeah, massive thank you to everyone who's taken part today. Hannah, is it possible to open up and unmute everyone?
So I've asked everybody to unmute, so it may happen. I think we can do it. Should we give it a go?
So if you'd like to join me in thanking everyone, that would be marvellous. Virtual claps.
Well done, James, it's great.
So Hannah's going to post that feedback poll now, and if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes just to fill that in, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Can you vote for yourself?
Of course you can, Andy.
And while you're filling that bowl, I'd just like to add that I'm absolutely thrilled. I'm sure as all of the team as well, to see so many of you and to see so many people prioritising for climate emergency in kind of their key interests. That's fantastic, and hope that continues. And I'm looking forward to welcoming you in the next event as well. So thank you, Jodie, for chairing.
Oh, and Anda is speaking as well at the wrap-up of Community Energy Fortnight about Northern Powergrid's socially inclusive transition as well, just to give her a plug.
Thanks, Emma.
29th of June.
That's really great to see that feedback coming in. So please do let us know what we can improve on. You know, there isn't an open box category in this polling process, but if you have specific things that you want to feedback to us, please do send them to Kai or Hannah and let us know, and we'll compile all of that for future and to try and make sure that these are as interactive and useful for you as possible. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Right, that's it. Close.
Yes.
Well done, guys.